Hello, my friends, and welcome to Dracula assignment number 5. Now, when we left off assignment number 4, you should have stopped on page 126, right at the top of Mina Murray's new journal entry of August 8th. What we saw happen in assignment number 4 was the ship had landed, right? We knew what happened with the ship captain, that he lashed himself to the wheel and whatnot to get away from it. We also know that the great dog jumped off the ship and ran off into the town. And I find it very ironic, of course, that they say right here at the end, no trace has ever been found of the great dog, at which there's much mourning for. With public opinion in its present state, he would, I believe, be adopted by the town. I find that very ironic. And tomorrow we will see the funeral, and so will end as one more mystery of the sea. Will this mystery of the sea really be over? Let's find out. So we're going to pick it up right now, right from there. On page 126, Mina Murray's journal, August 8th. Let's go. Now we're hearing from Mina's perspective. August 8th. Lucy was very restless all night, and I too could not sleep. Oh, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger for me. The storm was fearful, and as it boomed loudly among the chimney pots, it made me shudder. When a sharp puff came, it seemed to be like a distant gun. Strangely enough, Lucy did not wake, but she got up twice and dressed herself. Let's point that out again. Strangely enough, Lucy did not awake even with the sound of that great gun. Her sleep is being disturbed, and we know why and how. But she got up twice and dressed herself. Fortunately, each time I woke in time and managed to undress her without waking her and got her back to bed. And it's a very strange thing, the sleepwalking. For as soon as her will is thwarted in any physical way, her intention, as if there be any, disappears, and she yields herself almost exactly to the routine of her life. So it's easy to break the hypnosis of her sleep, but somebody has to be there watching her. Early in the morning, we both got up and went down to the harbor to see if anything had happened in the night. There were very few people about, and though the sun was bright and the air clear and fresh, the big, grim-looking waves that seemed dark themselves because the foam that topped them was like snow forced themselves in through the mouth of the harbor, like a bullying man going through a crowd. Sometimes I felt glad that Jonathan was not on the sea last night, but on land. But oh, is he on land or sea? Where is he and how? I'm getting fearfully anxious about him. If only I knew what to do and could do anything. 10th of August. The funeral of the poor sea captain today was most touching. Every boat in the harbor seemed to be there, and the coffin was carried by captains all the way from Tate Hill Pier up to the churchyard. Lucy came with me, and we went early to our old seat, whilst the cortege of boats went up the river to the viaduct and came down again. We had a lovely view and saw the procession nearly all the way. The poor fellow was laid to rest near our seat so that we stood on it when the time came and saw everything. Poor Lucy seemed much upset. She was restless and uneasy all the time, and I cannot but think that her dreaming at night is telling on her. She is quite odd in one thing. She will not admit to me that there is any cause for restlessness, or if there be, she does not understand it herself. Let's point that out. She will not admit it, but I think this other part is more real. Or if there be, she does not understand it herself. Remember, what's happening to her is happening to her while she is sleeping. There's an additional cause, in that poor Mr. Swales was found dead this morning on our seat, his neck being broken. He had evidently, as the doctor said, fallen back in the seat in some sort of fright, for there was a look of fear and horror on his face that the men said made them shudder. Poor dear old man. So what did old Mr. Swales see before he died that made him so afraid? Lucy is so sweet and sensitive that she feels influences more acutely than other people do. Just now she was quite upset by a little thing which I did not much heed, though I am very myself fond of animals. One of the men who came up here often to look for the boat was followed by his dog. The dog is always with him. They are both quite quiet persons, and I never saw the man angry, nor heard the dog bark. During the service, the dog would not come to its master, who sat on the seat with us, but kept a few yards off, barking and howling. Its master spoke to it gently, and then harshly, and then angrily. But it would neither come nor cease to make a noise. It was in a fury, with its eyes savage, and all its hair bristling out like a cat's tail when puss is on the warpath. So, I mean, think about this. You have this dog in this graveyard during the day, and it's freaking out. And she said this dog is always wonderful dog. What is it reacting to? What does it smell or sense in that graveyard? I'm wondering. Trying to find my spot again. You give me a second. Okay. Finally, the man got too angry and jumped out and kicked the dog, and then took it by the scruff of the neck and half dragged and half threw it on the tombstone on which the seat is fixed. The moment it touched the stone, the poor thing began to tremble. It did not try to get away, but crouched down, quivering and cowering, and was in such a pitiable state of terror that I tried, though without effect, to comfort it. See, what does the dog know that these people don't know? Lucy was full of pity too, but she did not attempt to touch the dog, but looked at it in an agonized sort of way. I greatly fear that she is of too supersensitive a nature to go through the world without trouble. She will be dreaming of this tonight, I am sure. The whole agglomeration of things, the ship steered into port by a dead man, his attitude tied to the wheel with a crucifix and beads, the touching funeral, the dog, now furious and now in terror, will all afford material for her dreams. I think it would be best for her to go to bed, tired out physically. So I shall take her for a long walk by the cliffs to Robin Hood's Bay and back. She ought not to have much inclination for sleepwalking then. Chapter 8, Mina Murray's journal. Same day, 11 o'clock p.m. But oh, I'm tired. If it were not that I had made my diary a duty, I should not open it tonight. We had a lovely walk. Lucy, after a while, was in gay spirits, owning, I think, to some dear cows who came nosing toward us in a field close to the lighthouse and frightened the wits out of us. I believe we forgot everything except, of course, personal fear, and it seemed to wipe the slate clean and give us a fresh start. We had a capital severe tea at Robin Hood's Bay in a sweet little old-fashioned inn with a bow window right over the seaweed-covered rocks of the Strand. I believe we should have shocked the new woman with our appetites. Men are more tolerant, bless them. Then we walked home with some, or rather many stoppages to rest, and with our hearts full of constant dread of wild bulls. Lucy was really tired, and we intended to creep off to bed as soon as we could. The young curate came in, however, and Miss Westerner asked him to stay for supper. Lucy and I had both a fight for it with the dusty miller. I know it was a hard fight on my part. And I am quite heroic. I think that someday the bishops must get together and see about breeding up a new class of curates who don't take supper, no matter how hard they may be pressed to, and who will know when girls are tired. So basically saying this old guy stayed with them all night and wouldn't leave them alone. Lucy is asleep and breathing softly. She has more color in her cheeks than usual and looks oh so sweet. Look at that. She has more color in her cheeks than usual and looks oh so sweet. That because she has had a day to recollect her blood. And was there a night last night? Remember, she tried to get out of the house, but she did not because she was stopped. So it's that her blood is coming back to her because it's not being drained every night as long as she is watched and stopped from leaving their apartment. If Mr. Hollandwood fell in love with her, seeing her only in the drawing room, I wonder what he would say if he saw her now. Some of the new women writers will someday start an idea that men and women should be allowed to see each other asleep before proposing or accepting. But I suppose the new woman won't condescend in future to accept. She will do the proposing herself, and a nice job she will make of it too. There's some consolation in that. So basically, we're just learning that Mina is big into feminine rights, female rights. I guess you could say she's a young feminist, right? A young American feminist, and what she's fighting for is she's saying that women should have more power in the processes of picking their husbands and getting married. And you know what? She's right. I'm so happy tonight because dear Lucy seems better. I really believe she has turned the corner and that we are over her troubles with dreaming. I should be quite happy if only I knew of Jonathan. God bless and keep him. 11 August, diary again. No sleep now, so I may as well write. I'm too agitated to sleep. We have had such an adventure, such an agonizing experience. Okay, so yesterday on the 10th, she said everything was growing well. Everything's fine. She thinks it's all done. But now on the 11th, she said something crazy happened. So it must have been last night. Let's find out. I fell asleep as soon as I'd closed my diary. Suddenly I became broad awake and sat up with a horrible sense of fear upon me and of some feeling of emptiness around me. So that's a very interesting quote. I wonder if that's what, remember our poem, The Vampire? I wonder if that is the same feeling that Gertrude felt when the vampire Sigismund was in the room eating her husband Herman. Interesting literary analysis there. Let's continue. Suddenly I became broad awake and sat up with a horrible sense of fear upon me and a feeling of emptiness around me. The room was dark, so I could not see Lucy's bed. I stole across and felt her. The bed was empty, or felt for her. The bed was empty. I lit a match and found that she was not in the room. The door was shut but not locked, as I had left it. I feared to wake her mother, who had been more than unusually ill lately, so I threw on some clothes and got ready to look for her. As I was leaving the room, it struck me that the clothes she wore might give me some clue to her dreaming intention. Dressing gown would mean house, dress outside. Dressing gown and dress were both in their places. Thank God, I said to myself. She cannot be far, as she is only in her nightdress. I ran downstairs and looked in the sitting room. Not there. Then I looked in all the other rooms of the house, with an ever-growing fear chilling my heart. Finally, I came to the hall door and I found it open. It was not wide open, but the catch of the lock had not caught. The people of the house are careful to lock the door every night, so I feared that Lucy must have gone out as she was. There was no time to think of what might happen. A vague, overmastering fear obscured all details. I took the big, heavy shawl and ran out. The clock was striking 1 as I was in the crescent, and there was not a soul in sight. I have to say, for Mina, she is pretty awesome. The fact that she runs out in the dark of night by herself to go find her friend, it's pretty awesome. I ran along the north terrace, but could see no sign of the white figure which I expected. At the edge of the west cliff above the pier, I looked across the harbor to the east cliff in the hope or fear, I don't know which, of seeing Lucy in our favorite seat. There was a bright full moon with heavy black driving clouds, which threw the whole scene into a fleeting diorama of light and shade as they sailed across. For a moment or two, I could see nothing, as the shadow of a claret obscured St. Mary's Church and all around it. Then as the cloud passed, I could see the ruins of the abbey coming into view. And as the edge of a narrow band of light, as sharp as a sword cut, moved along, the church and churchyard became gradually visible. Whatever my expectation was, it was not disappointed, for there, on our favorite seat, the silver light of the moon struck a half-reclining figure, snowy white. The coming of the cloud was too quick for me to see much, for shadow shut down on light almost immediately, but it seemed to me as though something dark stood behind the seat where the white figure shone and bent over it. Guys, I'm going to read that again. And gals, listen. But it seemed to me as though something dark stood behind the seat where the white figure shone and bent over it. What it was, whether man or beast, I could not tell. That's an interesting quote. Is it man or beast? Or both? All right. I did not wait to catch another glance, but flew down the steep steps to the pier and along by the fish market to the bridge, which was the only way to reach the east cliff. The town seems dead. For not a soul did I see. I rejoiced that it was so, for I wanted no witness of poor Lucy's condition. The time and distance seemed endless, and my knees trembled, and see, it's funny. Not funny, it's nice. She's worried, that Lucy's going to be embarrassed by sleepwalking in her night clothes. Basically, it's like her underpants, out into the night, into town. The time and distance seemed endless, and my knees trembled, and my breath came labored as I toiled up the endless steps to the abbey. I must have gone fast, and yet it seemed to me as if my feet were weighted with lead, and as though every joint in my body were rusty. When I got almost to the top, I could see the seat and white figure, for I was now close enough to distinguish it even through the spells of shadow. There was undoubtedly something long and black bending over the half-reclining white figure. There you go. Before she said she wasn't sure, but now she says there was undoubtedly something long and black bending over the half-reclining white figure. I called in fright, Lucy, Lucy! And something raised a head, and for where I could see a white face and red gleaming eyes. I think, of course, of the poem The Old Woman of Berkeley, with the devil and his red fire eyes. These aren't fire eyes, these are gleaming eyes. Remember, one of the characteristics of, two of the characteristics of vampires are that they could possibly have red or black eyes. Lucy did not answer, and I ran onto the entrance of the churchyard. As I entered, the church was between me and the seat, and for a minute or so I lost sight of her. When I came in view again, the cloud had passed, and the moonlight struck so brilliantly that I could see Lucy half reclining with her head lying over the back of the seat. She was quite alone, and there was not a sign of any living thing about. When I bent over her, I could see that she was still asleep. Her lips were parted, and she was breathing, not softly as usual with her, but in long, heavy gasps, as though striving to get her lungs full at every breath. As I came close, she put up her hand in her sleep and pulled the collar of her night dress close around her, as though she felt the cold. I flung the warm shawl over her and drew the edges tight around her neck, for I dreaded lest she should get some deadly chill from the night air, unclad as she was. I feared to wake her all at once, so in order to have my hands free to help her, I fastened the shawl at her throat with a big safety pin. Now, guys, remember, this is, way before that even penicillin, antibiotics were invented. So that's what she means by she dreads her getting a deadly cold. Because remember, if you get very sick in these days and you don't, you catch an infection or a fever, you could die because we didn't have the antibiotics or penicillin. So again, Mina's doing a really awesome thing by going out into this weather to help her friend. But I mean, geez, it's your friend. You better go do it. Okay, I feared to wake her all at once, so in order to have my hands free to help her, I fastened the shawl at her throat with a big safety pin. But I must have been clumsy in my anxiety and pinched or pricked her with it, for by and by, when her breathing became quieter, she put her hand to her throat again and moaned. When I had her carefully wrapped up, I put my shoes on her feet and then began very gently to wake her. I'll say, so she pins the shirt around her neck, the shawl, and she thinks, oh my God, I must have hurt her, because she keeps reaching up to grab her neck as if it's in pain. Guys, gals, Of course, it wasn't her who poked her with the pin. We know who did that to her neck. Let's continue. At first, she did not respond, but gradually she became more and more uneasy in her sleep, moaning and sighing occasionally. At last, as time was passing fast, and for many other reasons, I wished to get her home at once. I shook her forcibly till finally she opened her eyes and awoke. She did not seem surprised to see me, as of course she did not realize all at once where she was. Lucy always awakes very prettily, and even at such a time when her body must have been chilled with cold and her mind somewhat appalled at waking unclad in a churchyard at night, she did not lose her grace. She trembled a little and clung to me. When I told her to come at once with me home, she rose without a word, with the obedience of a child. As we passed along, the gravel hurt my feet, and Lucy noticed me wince. She stopped and wanted to insist upon my taking my shoes, but I would not. However, when we got to the pathway outside the churchyard, where there was a puddle of water remaining from the storm, I daubed my feet with mud, using each foot in turn on the other, so that as we went home, no one, in case we should meet anyone, should notice my bare feet. Also very interesting, she would rather have dirty, muddy feet than anybody see her have bare feet outside. Again, it has to do with the proprieties of the time, and I think it's specifically the proprieties of a woman. A woman would never show her bare feet to anybody because, of course, that's showing too much of her body. Remember, this is like closer on to the Victorian age, and we're learning more and more throughout this that women are really treated like second-class citizens, even less than children in some cases. And it's kind of crappy. Now, I will point out, and I'm happy to see it, that Van Helsing and the gentleman definitely treat Mina and the women with a little bit more than that, but still you can tell, and this is indicative of the times, just how crappily women were treated at the time. Let's continue. I mean, I just want to say one more thing. Imagine you would rather have mud on your feet, which, by the way, is an awful thing, especially with no showers and whatnot. You'd have to go home and then bathe your feet, wash them in a bucket or whatnot with soap and water, than have somebody see your naked feet. Oh, my geez, what would I do if somebody saw my feet? But that's the way they believed in those days. Okay, fortune favored us, and we got home without meeting a soul. Once we saw a man who seems not quite sober passing along a street in front of us, but we hid in a door till he had disappeared up an opening such as there are here, steep little closes or wings as they call them in Scotland. My heart beat so loud all the time, sometimes I thought I should faint. I was filled with anxiety about Lucy, not only for her health, lest she should suffer from the exposure, but for her reputation in case the story should get wind. When we got in and washed our feet and had said a prayer of thankfulness together, I tucked her into bed. Not to say about her she hated at first, I promise, but I'm thinking of the state of her mother's health and how the knowledge of such a thing would fret her, and think too of how such a story might become distorted, nay, infallibly would, in case it should leak out. I thought it was wiser to do so. I hope I did right. I have locked the door, and as the key is tied to my wrist, so perhaps I shall not be again disturbed. Lucy is sleeping soundly. The reflex of the dawn is high and far over the sea. Same day, noon, all goes well. Lucy slept till I woke her and seemed not to even have changed her side. The adventure of the night does not seem to have harmed her. On the contrary, it has benefited her, for she looks better this morning than she has done for weeks. I was sorry to notice that my clumsiness with the safety pin did hurt her. Indeed, it might have been serious, for the skin of her throat was pierced. I must have pinched up a piece of loose skin and have transfixed it, for there are two little red points like pinpricks, and on the band of her nightdress was a drop of blood. When I apologized and was concerned about it, she laughed and petted me and said she did not even feel it. Fortunately, it cannot leave a scar, as it is so tiny. Same day, night. We passed a happy day. The air was clear and the sun bright, and there was a cool breeze. We took our lunch to Mulgrave Woods, Mrs. Westerner driving by the road and Lucy and I walking by the cliff path and joining her at the gate. I felt a little sad myself, for I could not but feel how absolutely happy it would have been had Jonathan been with me. But there, I must only be patient. In the evening, we strolled into the casino terrace and heard some good music by Spohr and Mackenzie and went to bed early. Lucy seems more restful than she has been for some time and fell asleep at once. I shall lock the door and secure this key the same as before, though I do not expect any trouble tonight. 12 August. My expectations were wrong, for twice during the night I was wakened by Lucy trying to get out. She seemed, even in her sleep, to be a little impatient at finding the door shut and went back to bed under a sort of protest. I woke with the dawn and heard the birds chirping outside of the window. Lucy woke too, and I was glad to see was even better than on the previous morning. All her old gaiety of manner seemed to have come back, and she came and snuggled in beside me and told me all about Arthur. I told her how anxious I was about Jonathan, and then she tried to comfort me. Well, she succeeded somewhat, for though sympathy can't alter facts, it can make them more bearable. All right, this will be my last paragraph of this reading of assignment number 5, August 13th. I'm on page 136. Another quiet day, and to bed with the key in my wrist as before. Again, I awoke in the night and found Lucy sitting up in bed, still asleep, pointing to the window. I got up quietly and, pulling aside the blind, looked out. It was brilliant moonlight, and the soft effect of the light over the sea and sky merged together in one great silent mystery was beautiful beyond words. Beyond me and the moonlight flitted a great bat, coming and going in great whirling circles. Once or twice it came quite close, but was, I suppose, frightened at seeing me, and flitted away across the harbor towards the abbey. All right, so once the bat sees Mina, it takes off. When I came back from the window, Lucy had laid down again and was sleeping peacefully. She did not stir again all night. All right, so that's where I am right there. I'm taking a look. Hold on a second. What page was that? That was August. She did not stir again all night. So that's on page 136. You know what? Let's do a couple more. I want to read the next page. It's an important page. So I'll do one more page. August 14th, on the East Cliff, reading and writing all day. Lucy seems to have become as much in love with the spot as I am, and it's hard to get her away from it when it is time to come home for lunch or tea or dinner. Interesting. Since that night that something was bent over and apparently drinking from her neck, I think we know who that someone is. Now she always wants to go back to that spot. This afternoon, she made a funny remark. We were coming home for dinner and had come to the top of the steps from the West Pier and stopped to look at the view as we generally do. The setting sun low down in the sky was just dropping behind Kettleness. The red light was thrown out over the East Cliff and the old Abbey and seemed to bathe everything in a beautiful rosy glow. We were silent for a while, and suddenly Lucy murmured as if to herself. This is the paragraph I wanted to read. Listen. His red eyes again. They are just the same. It was such an odd expression coming apropos of nothing that it quite startled me. I slewed around a little so as to see Lucy well without seeming to stare at her, and saw that she was in a half-dreamy state with an odd look on her face that I could not quite make out, so I said nothing but followed her eyes. She appeared to be looking over at her own seat, whereon was a dark figure seated alone. I was quite a little startled myself, for it seemed for an instant as if the stranger had great eyes like burning flames, but a second look dispelled the illusion. The red sunlight was shining on the windows of St. Mary's Church behind our seat, and as the sun dipped, there was just a sufficient change in the reflection to make it appear as if the light moved. I called Lucy's attention to the peculiar effect, and she became herself with a start, but she looked sad all the same. It may have been that she was thinking of that terrible night up there. We never refer to it, so I said nothing, and we went home to dinner. Lucy had a headache and went early to bed. I saw her asleep and went out for a little stroll myself. Okay, now I am stopping. So if we are on the online version, you are on the bottom of page 137. It is, remember, if you need to find it via the dates, it is in the August 14th diary entry by Mina. Everybody, enjoy the rest of this reading. So for the end of assignment 5, you're going to read up to page 158, which means you only have 22 pages to read. Enjoy it and have a great day.